The strangest mistake of my life began with 6 words that should never have left my mouth. That's my boyfriend right there. I still remember the laughter that filled the hospital waiting room before everything went silent. 1 second people were talking, scrolling through their phones, sipping coffee from paper cups. The next, every eye was on me. I wish I could tell you I had a good reason for saying it. I didn't. At least not one that made sense. 3 days earlier, I had slipped on a rain-soaked sidewalk outside a grocery store in Brooklyn. Nothing dramatic. No flashing lights. No ambulance ride. Just a mild concussion and a doctor telling me to rest. But ever since then things felt off. Names slipped away. Familiar places seemed strange. Random images flashed through my mind without warning. I would see a face on television and feel like I knew them even when I didn't. At least that's what I thought. The waiting room smelled like coffee, disinfectant, and wet coats. Outside, November rain tapped against the windows. I sat between an elderly woman reading a magazine and a teenager playing games on his phone, while a news channel played on the television mounted near the ceiling. I wasn't paying attention until the reporter suddenly said a name. Ethan Blackwood. The camera switched to a man stepping out of a black SUV surrounded by executives and security personnel. Even through the screen he looked intimidating. Tall. Impeccably dressed. Dark hair. Sharp features. The kind of man who seemed completely out of place in ordinary life. The reporter called him America's most feared CEO. Some article had ranked him among the most powerful business leaders in the country. The woman beside me sighed. That man scares me. A few people nodded. Someone else joked that nobody would survive a conversation with him. And then before I could stop myself, I looked at the screen and smiled. Actually, I said casually, that's my boyfriend. The words escaped before my brain had a chance to catch them. A few people laughed. I should have laughed too. I should have said I was kidding. Instead, I stared at the screen, feeling a strange certainty settle in my chest. The teenager lowered his phone. Wait. Seriously. I blinked. My heart suddenly beat faster. Why had I said that? The answer should have been obvious. Because it wasn't true. Yet something deep inside me whispered otherwise. Before I could explain, one of the nurses burst out laughing. Someone pulled out their phone and started recording. No way, another person said. You're dating Ethan Blackwood? The room filled with amused voices. My cheeks burned. I don't know why I said that. More laughter. The video kept recording. Within minutes, the awkward moment was forgotten by everyone except me. But somewhere in Manhattan, inside the top-floor conference room of Blackwood Global, a video notification appeared on a phone screen. A junior executive thought it was funny. Then another employee shared it. Then another. By lunchtime, millions of people had watched the clip of a confused young woman claiming America's coldest CEO was her boyfriend. Most people laughed and moved on. Ethan Blackwood didn't. Because the moment he saw my face, he stood up so suddenly his chair rolled backward across the room. The board members froze. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For the first time all morning, Ethan Blackwood wasn't looking at quarterly reports or billion-dollar contracts. He was staring directly at me. And according to the stunned silence around him, he knew exactly who I was. The sound of rain followed me all the way home. It tapped against the subway windows. It drummed across apartment rooftops. It whispered outside my bedroom long after midnight. But none of it was loud enough to drown out the image of Ethan Blackwood staring at me from that television screen. I told myself I was overthinking everything. People posted strange videos online every day. Millions of clips disappeared into the internet without consequence. Mine would be forgotten by morning. At least that was what I kept repeating to myself as I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my tiny Brooklyn apartment. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, flashes of unfamiliar memories flickered through my mind. A black umbrella. A pair of green eyes reflected in glass. A deep voice saying something I could never quite hear. I sat up around 3 in the morning and switched on the lamp beside my bed. My heart was racing again. The concussion. That had to be the reason. The doctor warned me about headaches and temporary confusion. Maybe my brain was simply trying to make sense of random information. Maybe that was why a complete stranger felt oddly familiar. By sunrise, I had convinced myself everything would return to normal. It did not. My phone started buzzing before I even got out of bed. One notification became 10. 10 became 50. Then hundreds. Text messages from friends. Social media alerts. Missed calls from numbers I did not recognize. My stomach tightened as I opened one of the messages. Olivia, is this really you? Another read, girl, you are trending. A third simply contained a screenshot of my face beside a headline. Woman claims billionaire CEO is her boyfriend. I dropped my phone onto the bed. My pulse hammered in my ears. No. 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 This could not be happening. I opened one of the videos. There I was sitting in the waiting room, smiling at the television like an idiot, before making the comment that had apparently captured the attention of the entire internet. Thousands of comments filled the screen. Some people thought it was funny. Others thought I was delusional. A few insisted it was some kind of publicity stunt. I buried my face in my hands. This was a disaster. Around 9 o'clock, I finally left my apartment to buy coffee and clear my head. The cold November air stung my cheeks. The city moved around me like it always did. Taxi horns. Footsteps. Distant sirens. Life continued. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something had changed. I had almost reached the corner coffee shop when a black sedan rolled silently to the curb beside me. The vehicle looked expensive enough to cost more than my entire apartment building. The rear passenger door opened. A man stepped out wearing a charcoal suit and polished black shoes. He looked to be in his 40s. Professional. Calm. The kind of person who probably never raised his voice. He stopped directly in front of me. Miss Carter. My stomach dropped. Yes. He gave a polite nod. My name is Daniel Foster. I work for Mr. Blackwood. Every sound on the street seemed to disappear. The city faded into silence. Rainwater dripped from a nearby awning. My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. I am sorry, I said carefully. Which Blackwood? The man looked mildly surprised by the question. Ethan Blackwood. My heartbeat doubled instantly. Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you. The cup nearly slipped from my hand. Why? Daniel studied me for a moment. Then he answered with 4 words that made every hair on my arms stand up. Because he recognizes you. Because he recognizes you. The words followed me like an echo long after Daniel Foster finished speaking. For several seconds I simply stood there on the sidewalk staring at him while cold wind pushed strands of hair across my face. Nothing about this made sense. Ethan Blackwood did not know me. He could not know me. Before that ridiculous video, I had never seen him outside of magazine covers, business articles, and television interviews. Yet the certainty in Daniel's voice unsettled me. There must be some mistake, I finally said. Daniel remained calm. Mr. Blackwood does not make mistakes regarding people. That answer did not help. If anything, it made my stomach twist even harder. I looked toward the black sedan. The tinted windows revealed nothing. It felt less like a car and more like an invitation into a world I did not understand. What exactly does he want? I asked. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks. He would prefer to explain that personally. I laughed nervously. That sounds like something people say in movies right before a terrible decision. For the first time, a faint smile touched his face. Fortunately, this is not a movie. I wished I shared his confidence. Every reasonable instinct told me to walk away. Go home. Delete social media. Pretend none of this had happened. Yet another feeling lingered beneath the fear. Curiosity. The same strange pull I had felt every time I looked at Ethan's face. The same unsettling familiarity that made no logical sense. Before I realized what I was doing, I nodded. One meeting, I said. That is all. Daniel opened the rear door. Of course. The drive into Manhattan felt longer than it probably was. Rain streaked across the windows while skyscrapers rose around us like glass mountains. Nobody spoke. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers. Every few minutes I checked my phone, half expecting a message explaining that this entire situation had been a misunderstanding. No message came. 25 minutes later, the sedan slowed in front of Blackwood Global headquarters. I had seen pictures online. None of them prepared me for the real thing. The building seemed to disappear into the clouds. Steel and glass reflected the gray afternoon sky. Employees moved through revolving doors with purpose. Security officers stood near the entrance. The entire place radiated power. As soon as Daniel stepped out, people straightened. Receptionists greeted him by name. Security opened pathways without being asked. I suddenly felt very small. We entered a private elevator that required a key card and biometric scan. My pulse quickened as the doors closed. 30 seconds later, they opened onto the top floor. Silence greeted us. Thick carpet muted every footstep. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline stretching for miles. The office beyond looked more like a luxury penthouse than a workplace. Modern furniture. Dark wood. Clean lines. Nothing unnecessary. Daniel stopped near a pair of double doors. Mr. Blackwood is inside. My throat went dry. You are not coming with me? No. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Before I could change my mind, the doors opened automatically. The room beyond seemed impossibly large. And there he was. Ethan Blackwood stood near the windows with his hands in his pockets. The city stretched behind him. Gray light framed his silhouette. He looked exactly like he did on television and somehow completely different. More real. More intimidating. More human. His gaze lifted from the skyline and settled on me. The room became very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. 1 second passed. Then 2. Then Ethan did something completely unexpected. Relief flashed across his face. Genuine relief. Like someone who had spent years searching for something they thought was gone forever. Then he spoke 5 words that made my entire world tilt sideways. You really do not remember me. You really do not remember me. The question hung in the air between us. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My pulse pounded against my ribs while I searched his face for some clue that this was a misunderstanding. Nothing about Ethan Blackwood suggested he was joking. His expression remained calm, but something deeper flickered behind his eyes. Disappointment. Sadness. Maybe even grief. Feelings I never expected to see on the face of a man the entire business world seemed to fear. Should I? I finally asked. The words sounded smaller than I intended. Ethan studied me for several seconds. Then he slowly shook his head. No. The answer surprised me. No. He glanced toward the rain-covered windows overlooking Manhattan. If you remembered me, you would not be asking that question. My confusion only grew. I think you have me confused with someone else. I do not. The certainty in his voice sent a chill through me. Ethan walked toward a nearby table and picked up a glass of water. Every movement seemed controlled, deliberate, like a man who never wasted energy. 3 years ago, he said quietly, you were easier to argue with. I stared at him. 3 years ago I was teaching kindergarten in Queens. A faint smile appeared, small enough that I almost missed it. Yes, you were. My stomach tightened. How do you know that? Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he handed me the glass of water. The gesture was unexpectedly ordinary, human, not something I associated with billionaire CEOs. Because I knew you. The room suddenly felt smaller. The skyline beyond the windows blurred as my thoughts raced. That is impossible. I understand why you think that. No, you do not understand. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I have never met you. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Then he quietly asked, have you been having headaches? My breath caught. What? Headaches. Trouble sleeping. Fragments of memories that disappear before you can understand them. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. How did you know that? For the first time, Ethan looked away. The movement was brief, barely noticeable, yet it felt significant. Because it happened before. Every instinct told me there was more he was not saying. Much more. I sat down in one of the leather chairs facing his desk because my legs suddenly felt weak. What happened to me? Ethan remained standing. You suffered a concussion a few days ago. I know that. And before that? I frowned. Before that I was fine. He said nothing. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Then Ethan walked toward a cabinet built into the wall and unlocked a drawer. When he returned, he carried a thin black folder. My pulse quickened again. He placed it on the desk between us. Open it. Every alarm in my brain activated at once. Yet curiosity won. Slowly, I reached for the folder and lifted the cover. The first photograph stole the air from my lungs. It was me. Not a random picture from social media. Not a news screenshot. An actual photograph. I stood beside a food truck in Central Park wearing a yellow jacket I had not owned in years. I looked younger. Happier. My stomach dropped. I turned to the next photo. Again it was me. Laughing beside a fountain. Holding a cup of coffee. Reading on a park bench. There were dozens of pictures. Months of them. My hands started trembling. Why do you have these? Ethan's voice was almost inaudible. Because after you disappeared, they were all I had left. The room went silent. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I looked from the photographs back to Ethan. Every logical explanation I had been holding on to suddenly began to crack. And then my eyes landed on the final photograph in the folder. In that picture I was smiling directly at the camera, standing beside Ethan Blackwood. The photograph felt heavier than paper should have. My fingers tightened around its edges while my mind desperately searched for an explanation. There I was, standing beside Ethan Blackwood as if we had known each other forever. The sunlight in the picture caught my hair. I was smiling. Not the polite smile people use for cameras. A real one. Warm. Comfortable. Familiar. The kind of smile you only give someone you trust. My chest tightened. This is not possible. The words barely escaped my lips. Ethan remained silent. He was giving me space. Time. Yet his eyes never left me. I looked back down at the photograph. Maybe it was edited. Maybe someone had manipulated it. Technology could do almost anything these days. But even as the thought formed, I knew it was not true. The image looked real. Too real. Every shadow. Every reflection. Every tiny detail felt authentic. Tell me this is fake. Ethan slowly shook his head. I cannot do that. I swallowed hard. Then explain it. For a moment he seemed unsure. The hesitation surprised me. Ethan Blackwood was famous for making billion-dollar decisions without blinking. Yet now he looked like a man carefully choosing each word. You asked me once why I always worked so much. I stared at him. I never asked you that. His gaze softened. Exactly. The room felt colder. Rain tapped against the windows behind him. Somewhere far below, Manhattan continued moving through another ordinary afternoon, while my entire reality unraveled. Ethan walked toward the desk and sat across from me. Not behind it. Across from me. Equal distance. Equal eye level. It felt intentional. 3 years ago, he said quietly, you used to bring coffee to a small park near Bryant Park every Thursday morning. My heart skipped. How do you know that? Because I met you there. I frowned. I do not remember. I know. His answer carried no frustration. Only sadness. You always sat on the same bench. My pulse quickened again. A lot of people sit on benches. You fed the pigeons even though they terrified you. I froze. Ethan continued. You carried peppermints in your coat pocket because you hated coffee breath. You listened to old jazz playlists when you graded papers. You cried during animated movies and pretended you did not. Each sentence landed like a small shock. Not because I remembered them, because they were true. Every single one. My throat went dry. Those were not things people could find online. They were details. Personal details. The kind only someone close would know. How? I whispered. Ethan looked down briefly before meeting my eyes. Again. Because you told me. Silence filled the office. I felt dizzy. Not from fear. From the impossible weight of what I was hearing. My memories remained blank, yet pieces of recognition flickered deep inside me. Tiny sparks in the darkness. A park bench. Autumn leaves. The smell of coffee. None of it formed a complete picture. But something was there. Something buried. Ethan noticed my expression immediately. What is it? Nothing. Olivia. Hearing my name in his voice felt strangely familiar. Too familiar. I pressed my fingers against my temple. Another headache was building behind my eyes. I think. I stopped. The image had appeared for only a second. A flash. A blurry memory. A man standing beneath an umbrella. Rain falling around us. Green eyes. My breath caught. Ethan leaned forward slightly. What did you see? I looked up at him. My pulse hammered in my ears. I saw rain. The color drained from his face. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. His reaction frightened me more than anything else had. Because for the first time since entering his office, Ethan Blackwood looked afraid. Then he quietly asked a question that made my stomach drop. Did you also see the bridge? Did you also see the bridge? The question hit me harder than it should have. I stared at Ethan while the headache behind my eyes sharpened into something deeper. Not pain. Pressure. Like a locked door in my mind had suddenly felt someone rattling the handle from the other side. I do not know, I admitted. It happened too fast. Ethan slowly leaned back in his chair. The tension in his shoulders remained. Whatever memory I had almost touched clearly mattered more than he wanted to admit. Outside the windows, gray clouds drifted over Manhattan. The city looked distant now. Unreal. As though the entire world existed somewhere far away from this office and the strange conversation unfolding inside it. Tell me about the bridge, I said. Ethan was quiet for several seconds. Not yet. Frustration immediately flared inside me. You keep saying things like that. You keep acting like you know everything while I know nothing. His jaw tightened. Because right now you only remember fragments. Then help me remember. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Concern. Genuine concern. Olivia. Forcing memories can make things worse. How would you know? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Ethan looked away toward the skyline. Because I watched it happen before. Silence filled the room again. I suddenly realized that despite all his power, all his confidence, Ethan carried exhaustion in his eyes. The kind that came from waiting too long for something you could not control. What happened 3 years ago? I asked more softly. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked toward the windows. The city reflected faintly across the glass. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I was not someone people enjoyed being around. I almost laughed. From what I have read online, that has not changed much. To my surprise, a small smile appeared. Fair. He folded his arms. My life was simple. Work. Meetings. More work. I measured every day by numbers on reports and stock prices. His voice carried none of the pride I expected from a billionaire. Only honesty. Then one Thursday morning, a woman stole my favorite bench. I blinked. What? He glanced back at me. The park. A memory flickered. Not complete. Just sunlight through leaves. A paper coffee cup. Then it vanished. Ethan continued. You sat there every week. Eventually I stopped pretending I was reading reports and started talking to you. My pulse quickened. And I talked to you? More than anyone else. The answer came immediately. Like he had never forgotten a second of it. I looked down at the photograph still resting in my lap. A strange ache settled inside my chest. Not sadness exactly. More like homesickness for a place I could not remember. Ethan returned to the desk and opened another folder. This one contained no photographs. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn from being handled too many times. You wrote this. Carefully, he handed it to me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was mine. There was no question. Every curve. Every letter. Unmistakably mine. I stared at the words. Dear Ethan, stop taking life so seriously. The world will not end if you smile once in a while. A strange warmth spread through my chest. The message continued. Also, if you skip lunch again this week, I am personally revoking your coffee privileges. I felt myself smile despite everything. The note sounded exactly like something I would write. Ethan noticed immediately. You remember something? No. I swallowed. But that sounds like me. His eyes softened. It does. For the first time all afternoon, the silence between us felt different. Less tense. More familiar. Then my phone suddenly vibrated on the desk. The sound shattered the moment. I glanced at the screen. An unknown number. One new message. My stomach dropped as I opened it. The text contained only 7 words. Do not trust Ethan Blackwood. He is lying. Do not trust Ethan Blackwood. He is lying. The message seemed to burn into the screen. My heartbeat instantly accelerated. Every pleasant feeling that had begun forming during the past few minutes vanished. I read the words again. Then again. The sender was unknown. No name. No number I recognized. Just 7 simple words that somehow managed to shake everything. Ethan noticed the change in my expression immediately. What happened? I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to show him, which was exactly why I did. I turned the phone around and let him read the screen. For the first time since meeting him, Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Not guilty. Not nervous. Surprised. He took a slow breath. When did this arrive? 30 seconds ago. His jaw tightened slightly. Interesting. That was not the response I expected. Interesting. I repeated. Someone knew you were here. The realization hit me immediately. My eyes widened. This office occupied one of the most secure buildings in Manhattan. Very few people should have known where I was. Yet somehow someone had sent a warning at the exact moment Ethan and I were discussing my past. Ethan picked up his desk phone and pressed a button. Daniel. The reply came instantly through the speaker. Yes, sir. I want a security review of all incoming communications connected to Miss Carter. Understood. Ethan ended the call and turned back toward me. You are not worried? I asked. I am. His answer surprised me. Then why do you seem so calm? He gave a humorless smile. Because panic rarely improves a situation. I hated how reasonable that sounded. My phone remained in my hand. The message stared back at me. A warning from a stranger. Or maybe not a stranger. Maybe someone who knew something I did not. The possibility settled heavily in my chest. What if they are right? I asked quietly. Ethan did not answer immediately. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Somewhere below us, traffic crawled through Manhattan streets. The world felt strangely distant. Finally he spoke. Then you should leave. I blinked. What? If you believe I am lying, walk out that door. I will not stop you. The answer caught me completely off guard. Powerful men were supposed to persuade, manipulate, convince. Ethan did none of those things. Instead, he simply sat there and waited. The silence stretched. My thoughts spun. Every piece of evidence pointed in different directions. The photographs were real. The note I had written was real. The memories trying to surface felt real. Yet the warning message existed too. I rubbed my temples. I do not know what to believe anymore. Ethan's voice softened. Then believe what you can verify. Such as. He stood and walked toward a bookshelf near the windows. From the top shelf, he pulled down a small object and carried it over. Start with this. He placed it carefully in front of me. My breath caught. It was an old ceramic mug. White with tiny blue flowers painted around the rim. Ordinary. Inexpensive. Yet the moment I saw it, something inside me shifted. My fingers moved toward it automatically. The room faded. The rain disappeared. Suddenly I was standing somewhere else. A small coffee shop. Warm lighting. The smell of cinnamon. Laughter. A man's voice. My voice. The memory flashed like lightning and vanished. I gasped. The mug nearly slipped from my hands. Ethan froze. Olivia. My pulse raced. I know this mug. The words came out before I could stop them. Ethan stared at me. Hope flickered across his face. From? Where? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to hold on to the memory before it disappeared again. The coffee shop felt familiar. Important. So did the person sitting across from me. I could almost see his face. Almost. Then another image appeared. Stronger this time. Clearer. Not a coffee shop. Not a park. A bridge. Rain pouring from a dark sky. A man standing alone near the railing. And me running toward him. My eyes flew open. The room snapped back into focus. Ethan had gone completely still. I looked directly at him. My voice barely rose above a whisper. I remember the bridge. And I remember you were there. The moment the words left my mouth, every trace of color disappeared from Ethan's face. I remember the bridge. And I remember you were there. Silence filled the office. The rain outside seemed louder now, tapping steadily against the glass as though counting down to something neither of us could stop. Ethan did not speak immediately. He looked at me with an expression I could not fully understand. relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. Tell me what you remember, he said quietly. I closed my eyes. The memory was fragile, like trying to hold water in my hands. It was raining, I whispered. A lot of rain. The image sharpened slightly. The bridge was almost empty. Ethan remained perfectly still. Go on. I pressed my fingers against my temple. The headache returned, but this time I pushed through it. You were standing alone. Another flash. Dark clouds overhead. Wind. Streetlights reflecting on wet pavement. You looked. I struggled for the right word. Lost. Ethan looked away. That single movement told me more than any answer could have. The memory was real. Somehow impossibly it was real. What happened that night? I asked. Ethan slowly sat down across from me. For the first time since I arrived, he seemed less like a powerful executive and more like an ordinary man carrying a burden he had hidden for years. I had just lost someone important. His voice was calm, but sadness lingered beneath every word. Everything in my life felt meaningless. I listened without interrupting. The city skyline stretched behind him. Gray clouds drifted between skyscrapers. Then you appeared. Another memory flashed. This one stronger. I saw myself holding an umbrella, running through the rain, calling out to someone, calling out to him. My breath caught. I spoke to you. Ethan nodded. For almost 2 hours. The image sharpened again. A conversation beneath rain-soaked streetlights. Two strangers standing on opposite sides of a bench. My chest tightened. I remember your coat. The words escaped before I realized I was speaking. Ethan blinked. The gray one. My eyes widened. Yes. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The pieces were finally beginning to connect. Not completely, but enough to feel real. You told me life was not something you measured with success. Ethan's voice softened. You remember that? A little. Another flash. His face. Younger somehow. Tired. Listening carefully while I talked. You said people matter more than accomplishments. Ethan looked down briefly. You changed my life that night. The office suddenly felt very quiet. Every article I had ever read described Ethan Blackwood as brilliant, intimidating, unstoppable. Nobody had ever described him as vulnerable. Yet that was exactly what I saw now. What happened after? I asked. Ethan opened his mouth to answer. Before he could, my phone vibrated again. The sound felt almost violent in the silence. Both of us looked down. Another unknown message. My stomach twisted as I opened it. This one contained a photograph. The image loaded slowly. Then my breath stopped. It was me, standing beside Ethan near the bridge. Rain falling around us. The photograph had clearly been taken from a distance without our knowledge. Underneath the picture was a single sentence. The truth about that night was hidden from you. My hands began trembling. Ethan's expression hardened immediately. Not with anger. With concern. Real concern. I looked from the message back to him. What does this mean? For the first time since our conversation began, Ethan hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. There was something he still was not saying. Something important. Something connected to the night that had changed both our lives. Then he quietly spoke. The words I never expected to hear. Because the accident that erased your memories was not random. Because the accident that erased your memories was not random. The words seemed to steal the oxygen from the room. I stared at Ethan, waiting for him to explain, waiting for everything to finally make sense. Instead, silence stretched between us. Rain traced slow paths down the glass behind him while Manhattan disappeared beneath a curtain of gray clouds. What does that mean? I asked. My voice sounded distant even to me. Ethan exhaled slowly. It means someone wanted you to forget. My pulse hammered in my ears. Forget what? His eyes met mine. Me. I laughed once. It was not humor. It was disbelief. You expect me to believe that? No. His answer came immediately. I expect you to question everything. I looked down at the photograph on my phone again. The bridge. The rain. The two of us standing together while someone secretly watched from a distance. Suddenly the anonymous messages felt less random. Less harmless. Who is sending these? I asked. Ethan shook his head. I do not know. You know more than you are telling me. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded. Yes. At least he was honest. 3 years ago after we met we became friends. His voice softened. Closer than friends eventually. A strange ache settled in my chest. Not because I remembered. Because part of me wished I did. Ethan walked toward the window. For almost a year, you were the most important person in my life. I swallowed hard. Then what happened? His reflection stared back from the glass. One day you disappeared. The words landed heavily. Disappeared. You stopped answering calls. Your apartment was empty. Your school said you resigned. My stomach tightened. That does not sound like me. It was not. Another memory flashed. A packed train station. A suitcase. A feeling of urgency. Then darkness. Gone again. Ethan continued. I spent months searching for you. I looked at him carefully. Every article I had ever read described Ethan Blackwood as relentless in business. Now I realized he was relentless in everything. Did you find me? I asked quietly. He turned toward me. Eventually. My breath caught. Where? Chicago. The answer surprised me. I had never lived in Chicago. At least not that I remembered. You were using a different name. The room suddenly felt unsteady. What? Ethan nodded. You did not remember me then either. A chill ran through me. I lost my memory before? Part of it. His voice grew quieter. The doctors called it trauma-related memory loss. My heart pounded harder. Everything was beginning to connect in ways I did not like. So this has happened before. Yes. The truth settled heavily between us. Then another memory surfaced. Stronger than all the others. A hospital room. White walls. A hand holding mine. Someone promising they would find me again. My breath stopped. I knew that hand. I knew that voice. I looked at Ethan. Really looked at him. Suddenly I did not see the billionaire from television. I saw the man standing beside a hospital bed refusing to leave. Emotion flickered across his face as if he understood exactly what I had remembered. Olivia? He asked softly. Tears stung unexpectedly behind my eyes. You found me before. Ethan nodded once. Yes. The room went silent. Every puzzle piece seemed close enough to touch now. Almost complete. Almost. Then my phone vibrated one final time. Another message. Another unknown sender. My hands trembled as I opened it. There was no photograph this time. No warning. Just a single sentence. And the moment I read it, the last missing piece of my memory crashed back into place. The message said, Ask Ethan why you were forced to leave the city the night he proposed.